All right, here we are. We're going to take a look at a second version of the infographic. So again, I'm going to start over, and again, the video is sped up. So in this case, I'm creating one that's really tall and skinny. It's 18 by 36, so 1.5 feet by 3 feet. And this is basically just a different version of the same information presented in a slightly different way. You'll notice that I'm not worried about layers this time. I'm just going to try and zip through it as fast as I can. So we're going to start off. I've added that same logo image, blowing it up real big. And this time when I looked at it, I'm sort of working from the bottom up. So I'm going to start with my background. I move that to the back. It starts out gray, but I don't want it to be gray. I'm going to use the color picker and pick a color off of that logo because, again, we're building it in the same sort of color palette that I did the entire thing, except I'm actually using the logo image to build the color palette. Adding in other example. So we are just sort of blowing it up, changing it, arranging the size, centering it, and again, playing with those fonts, trying to decide what we want the fonts to look like this time, going with a little bit different design, but just sort of the same idea, deciding what looks good. And when you design something for an actual client, somebody who's paying you to do this, you're generally going to make a couple of different versions of that assignment or of that project just because it allows you to give your client different options. So we've got all this. I'm going to go ahead and I've decided to make this just sort of a strict vertical timeline based on year. So I've added a circle and I'm looking for a color to fill that circle with. And I wasn't really happy with any of those. I was trying to look at maybe shades of the background color. That didn't work. So what I'm going to do next is as I look through this and I decide none of these are really working, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump out and I'm going to go back to our color palette website. So I flipped through those, I didn't like them. I'm copying this hex value and I'm going to jump over to color.adobe.com and I'm going to paste it as my primary color down there in the dead center. And I'm going to look at these different options until I find one that I like. And I think maybe this light blue will work. Didn't work. I'm going to go for the darker blue. And again, changing that, I'm just copying and pasting those hex values. And I like that blue. So I'm going to add years because, again, I'm going to make this a strict timeline. So we've created the circle, we've added the text, and now all I've done is I've copied the previous work over. Okay, there's no reason to redo it or redesign it. I might as well just use what's already built. And I'm resizing it just so it fits the space a little better. And so I'm looking at this and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this circle and date setup for each of the years that I care about. In this case, it's going to be like 92, 96, copying over that Daggerfall information as well. Because again, there's no point in me redesigning this when I'm just presenting the same information in a slightly different visual format. And just like the other one, I am going to go ahead and adjust the size. You can tell right here, I was thinking about putting the text on the opposite side of the date point. That didn't really appeal to me. So I noticed as I was working here that I was really running out of space. So I went ahead and I shranked sort of my header, my title piece, and I'm going to move all this up a little bit on the page just to give me a bigger area to work with. And this is the big thing, is that as you discover that you've got size issues, change sizes, move stuff around. And again, all I'm doing is I'm duplicating the same thing. Once you've done something once, if you're going to use the same thing, there's no point in rebuilding it from scratch. Copy and paste. That Control-C, Control-V is your friend. So I've got all of these. I'm grouping them together so that the dates are the same. And then I'm going to line them up. And I want to have some way to connect them. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a line, putting it on there, and I'm going to make it a dashed line. So these dash gap values do change how it's actually spaced. And their appearance is based on the thickness of the line. As I work through here trying to find a value that I really like, you'll notice that occasionally I'll go back and I'll modify the thickness of that border line so that I get a different effect. And as I go through, you can tell it's not really showing up the way I want it to, because I kind of want it to show the dashed line behind the circles, in between the circle spaces. So as I play with this a lot, I realized that one of the things I need to do is move the line over out of the way so I could really see how it looked and then modify it from there. So in this case, I get a better dash this way so I can sort of see what's going on. And then I am going to go back and I'm going to modify that border width, because this line ends up just being a little too thick. So I drop it down a little bit, go back in, modify my dash again, and I get this kind of nice little 3 dots in between each of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of my circles after putting that path underneath everything, but I'm going to grab all of my circles and I'm going to use the distribute option by selecting all of them and then using the distribute option in the alignment in the upper right. And what it's going to do is Gravit is going to automatically space these circles evenly. So I don't have to worry about that. They're perfectly spaced. Now I go back in, I center my lines, and then I have to center my circles on that line just to make sure that they're all in a row. And I look at this, and as I'm looking at it, I realize it doesn't allow me a whole lot of space. So I'm going to sort of offset. I'm going to move one set of dates to one side, the other set to the other. So again, I'm building this pattern, and I use the align to right and align to left edge to line those up vertically. And I kind of like this. It's giving me a very distinct vertical path, so the eye is going to follow it date by date. And it gives me space to put all of my values in. You can see I'm just sort of playing. Now I come back, I start grabbing all the rest of these. Now, because this one's double wide compared to the other, I have to figure out the width and the shape of it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete that background piece by ungrouping and then deleting it out. Select the whole thing. I line it up and I start shrinking it. And you'll notice one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as the basis for the rest of my pieces. So I'm going to grab the next one. I'm going to remove its background as well. And when I put it over here, I want to make sure that it's the same size as Morrowind. So I click on Morrowind, get the width, copy it, and paste it into this Oblivion one, this Elder Scrolls 4 one, the 2006 year. So it gets the same width. And that width ends up being even across the whole thing. So that way, again, it looks correct. It looks like it is the same value, because it is. Now you notice in this one, I'm not going to include the next game coming up because it doesn't really matter. And again, it's what do you want to do, and what fits in your space. So I take this, I sort of line it all up, I space it out, and I look at these texts and I was like, I need to adjust the size. I need to make it a little more readable. So I centered them, and then I started adjusting the sizes just so that they were larger and more easily read. Okay, think about a normal sheet of paper, and you want to have at least probably a 12-point font. Obviously, I had to go in and make some adjustments to how it was typed, just to make it look right and to make it even, and fill the space properly, because you don't want something to sort of stand out because it doesn't look right. So all I'm doing is I'm removing some of the carriage returns, basically the new line markers, to get it to the correct spacing that I enjoyed. I shortened up that line so we didn't have the end of it. Copy and paste all of my reference material. Obviously, I have to change the size of it just because there is a difference in the area that it's filling. And once again, the size doesn't really matter as long as it's all there. You want it to just be visible, or at least accessible to people who want to look at it. So as we look at this, I was generally happy, but there was sort of this gap at the top. So I decided to go ahead and modify my title a little bit. I left the Elder Scrolls inside the main logo, okay, changing the size, blowing it up a little bit. And then I wanted to go ahead and make it sort of stand out a little more. So what I did was I copied and pasted my title a couple of times, okay? And I changed the color on it. So I made one red, one black, and then all I did was I lined them up, put the black on top, line them on top of each other, and then group them together. And I kind of get this instant drop shadow. And it's very similar to using the actual drop shadow effect, but it's a little more controllable by you, the designer, because you can get exactly what you want without having to go into how the drop shadows work perfectly. So I'm going to do the same thing over here with the character viewpoints box, except this time, instead of just using 2 colors, I wanted it to really pop out. So I'm going to go ahead and use 3 colors. I'm going to use red, black, and white. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to layer them in the order I care about. So in this case, again, I'm putting black on top and I'm putting red on the bottom, but this time I'm putting a white layer in between them. And now I'm going to grab that red, line it up underneath. So again, it pops out off the screen, and that's it. That is my second version using all the same data to write it all through.